This video is brought to you by Sailrite. Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. If you own an Ultrafeed sewing machine but want a solid industrial table designed for your sewing machine, Sailrite now offers that, but with something more that is truly impressive. The Ultrafeed Sewing Machine set up to work with our new Workhorse Servo Motor. The Ultrafeed sewing machines have always been known for slow speed control and power. But when coupled with the Workhorse Servo Motor, you now get ultimate power and unmatched slow speed control. Here, we are punching through a thick fabric assembly, and we can sew so slowly that the needle only moves in quarter increments. In the past, this has not been possible, but thanks to the Workhorse Servo Motor with Cog Pulley and the Power Plus balance wheel, it is now a reality. So now you get the best of both worlds, the portability of the Ultrafeed sewing machine in its carrying case, and now a truly industrial sewing workstation called the Ultrafeed Industrial Sewing Table and Workhorse Servo Motor. Ready to order one for your Ultrafeed sewing machine? Click the link at the top right to get yours. The remainder of this video will show how to assemble the Ultrafeed Industrial Sewing Table and Workhorse Servo Motor. Congratulations on the purchase of the Ultrafeed Industrial Sewing Table and Workhorse Servo Motor. We'll now show you how to assemble the table, mount the motor, and then you can insert your Ultrafeed sewing machine and get started sewing. To assemble the back brace to the K-leg, find these components. Turn the legs upright. Insert the large bolt and washer through the hole of the back brace. On the opposite side, the rectangular washer. Then the nut. Thread the nut onto the bolt. Before tightening completely, do the same to the opposite side on the opposite K-leg. Using a socket or a wrench, now those bolts can be tightened. The rectangular shaped washer on the inside will keep the nut from spinning. In preparation for mounting the floor brace, find these bolts, nuts, and washers. Turn the K-legs upside down. Install the treadle mount as shown here along the front portion of the K-legs. Zach is standing behind the K-legs. Insert the bolts through the underside and then a washer and a nut as shown here. Do not tighten down the nuts all the way until all four bolts, washers, and nuts have been inserted in the bottom of the treadle mount bar. We like to push the treadle mount bar back in the slotted opening and then tighten down all of the nuts. Now place the tabletop face down against the floor on a surface that will not damage it. Notice that we're marking on the back edge of the tabletop where the cutout is closest to the side. We'll mark in 1.5 inches and place a mark. Then from the side, we'll measure over 1 inch and place a mark. Then on the front edge, to ensure that the legs are straight, we'll place another mark 1 inch in. The front edge of the table has the 36-inch ruler affixed to it. Using those marks, we can now position the K-legs as shown here in the video. Take note of how the K-legs are resting on the table. Zach is behind the table. Then he will mark the slotted openings where a screw will be inserted. To ensure that the opposite K-leg is straight, he will measure in 1.5 inches here as well and place a mark. Then he'll place the K-legs at that mark. This ensures that they're straight, and he'll mark the slotted openings. Pre-drill the holes with a 5/32 inch drill bit. Do not drill all the way through the table. Only drill halfway through. That is very important. We like to drill in the center of each one of the slotted openings. Using a socket, we've installed a socket on this drill, we'll use the wood screws with lock washer and flat washer, and we will insert them in the holes we just made. You could also use a screwdriver or a wrench if you do not have a socket. Do not tighten them down all the way until all 4 screws are installed. Then tighten them down securely. The drawer is typically installed here on the front side of the table. use the 2 rails that are included. There are 4 holes in each rail, 8 holes altogether, but only 6 screws are provided. Position the drawer and the rails to your liking. Then install the screws using a Phillips screwdriver or a driver installed in a drill. We recommend not tightening them down all the way until all 6 screws are installed. Do not over-tighten the screws or the drawer may not open smoothly. Your package will come with 4 rubber leg cushions for the K-legs. Install them as shown here on all 4 legs. Now invert the table right side up. To adjust the tabletop height, release these 4 bolts at the top of the K-legs. Do not remove them completely, just loosen them. Using a helper, lift the table to your desired height. It's typically recommended to use the chair you will be sewing with to determine the height that works best for you. Use a level to ensure that the tabletop is straight and then tighten all of the bolts. You will find these components for the Gyro Hinge. Insert the rubber base into the back of the table. Then use one of these wood screws and screw right in the center of the rubber base for the Gyro Hinge, as shown here. When the head is flush, stop screwing. Perfect. Now take the oil pan and use these 4 nails to secure it in place. Place it underneath the table and be sure that it's level with the Gyro Hinge to the right as Zach is facing the table. Using the layers of plywood, you can ensure that it is level. The nail hole here should be slightly left of center underneath the rubber base for the Gyro Hinge. A second helper may be required to help hold the oil pan in the appropriate position as one person nails each one of the nails through the hole in the oil pan as seen here. Do not drive the nail all the way down to its head until all 4 nails are installed. Make sure the nails are driven in straight, otherwise it will blow out the bottom of the table. Counting the layers of plywood, you can determine where it should rest on this side so that it's equal with the opposite side. Once all nails are installed, then you can drive them all the way to the head, as shown here. Here we're using McLube to lubricate the threaded insert. You can also use soap if you do not have a dry lubricant, like McLube. A pre-drilled hole is already present in the tabletop. Using the provided hex key, screw the threaded insert into that hole. The tabletop surface around the perimeter of the hole will flake apart slightly, but the flanged top of the threaded insert will hide all that once it's inserted flat onto the tabletop. This threaded insert will be used for the integrated thread stand. After unpacking the Workhorse Servo Motor, we'll install the Cog Pulley. Onto the shaft of the motor, place the key in the slotted portion of the shaft. It is rare that the key may be oversized, but if it is, you may have to use a Dremel tool and a cutting stone to grind it down slightly so that it fits better in the keyway. Now we'll test it in the slot on that shaft. Turned this direction, it does fit in that slot, but will the pulley easily slide onto it? There is a groove in the pulley. Be sure it's lined up with the key, and then try pushing it on. We do not recommend forcing the pulley onto the shaft. If the key is still too large, take it out and grind it some more. Now the key fits perfectly onto the slot of the shaft, and the pulley should slide beautifully onto that shaft. Next, push a flat washer onto the shaft, then a locking washer. Then you'll find a lock nut. Be sure the nylon locking portion is facing out, away from the motor. Use a socket or a wrench to tighten the nut onto the threaded post. You will have to hold the pulley as you tighten the nut. Carefully turn the table on its back, as shown here. Find the components for the foot treadle, as seen here. You will find 4 bolts, 4 nuts, and 4 flat washers, as shown here. They will be used to secure the treadle to the floor brace. The brackets will be installed to the floor brace with those bolts, nuts, and washers as shown here. The locations of those brackets on the treadle mount bar is totally up to the user's preference. However, we prefer to install it in the slots shown. The notches in the treadle mount bar look like squares. Zach's counting the squares to see where the brackets should be installed. Do not yet tighten up the nuts. In fact, only thread them so that they are started. Now find the treadle itself and push it over the prongs of the brackets we just installed on the treadle mount bar. Since the brackets are loose, they should easily fit into the holes of the treadle. Now the nuts on the underside of the treadle mount bar can be tightened by hand. While tightening these nuts by hand, ensure that the treadle will move freely up and down and that it is not bound. If that's the case, use a wrench and a socket or 2 wrenches and tighten up the nuts. Again, as you're tightening, ensure that the treadle moves freely up and down and is not bound in any way. There are several holes in the back side of the treadle. We'll use those to mount the bracket that holds the linkage that will go from the treadle to the Workhorse Servo Motor. We'll install that bracket as shown here in the video. Line up the end of the bracket so that it's directly over the second from the left hole as you're looking down at the treadle as shown here. Now tighten those nuts. After both nuts are tightened, we can turn the table right side up. Plug the servo motor in and turn it on. Push down on the lever and check to be sure that the pulley turns counterclockwise. If it does not, refer to the owner manual of the Workhorse Servo Motor. Along with the Workhorse Servo Motor, you'll find these bolts, nuts, washers, and lock washers. First, install 2 bolts into the holes that are shown in this illustration. Then on the bottom side, install a flat washer, a lock washer, and a nut. Thread the nuts about a 1/2 inch up the threaded post. And now we can take the Workhorse Servo Motor and slide the bracket over top of those nuts and washers. Then the 3rd bolt can be inserted in the front, and now the washer, lock washer, and nut can be threaded onto that bolt as well. Before tightening any nuts, push the Workhorse Servo Motor so that the pulley is aligned through the belt opening of the tabletop. Using a wrench or a socket, tighten down the nuts. Since the heads of the bolts are anchor heads, they may have to be pounded down gently into the tabletop, as the anchors must eventually go through the tabletop surface. This will help make it easier to tighten down the nuts. Again, before tightening down securely, be sure that your motor is slid in the proper position by lining up the pulley with the slot in the tabletop for the belt. Then tighten them down securely. That will draw the anchor heads into the table so that they rest flat. The provided support pin goes in this final hole, as shown here. Your kit may contain 2 linkage bars. We will only use 1. Find it and then release this nut that allows adjustment of the linkage. We will attach the 1 link to the treadle via that bracket we installed earlier. We will place a washer, a lock washer, and then a nut on the back side. The other half of the linkage should be attached to the arm of the Workhorse Servo Motor, the frontmost hole. Remove the nut, the lock washer, and the flat washer. Post goes through that hole, then install the washer and lock washer, then nut. Now the bracket we originally loosened up can be pushed back into position so that the bars are right next to each other going through that bracket. The top of the treadle should be pushed up to its max position. Then that bracket securing both linkage arms should be tightened up. Use a wrench to do this. The nuts connecting the linkage bar to the treadle and the Workhorse Servo Motor arm were only tightened by hand. You may want to use a wrench to tighten those up securely. Press on the treadle and the arm on the servo motor should go down, and then when you release the treadle, the arm will go up. Our Ultrafeed Industrial Tabletop with Workhorse Servo Motor is now ready to accept the Ultrafeed Sewing Machine. The integrated thread stand can be removed from the carrying case and mounted in the tabletop. It is installed through the threaded insert that we installed earlier. Once your Ultrafeed is removed from the carrying case or wooden base, you can install the Gyro hinges in the back of it. The screws securing the Gyro hinges have not yet been tightened down. We'll remove the support pin here and carefully tilt the machine back and tighten up the screws at the bottom of the Ultrafeed sewing machine, locking the Gyro hinge posts in place. Notice the Ultrafeed fits perfectly into that cutout of the tabletop. Now, to convert the Ultrafeed into an incredible workstation, remove the posi pin and the posi pin nut, and also the balance wheel. The bottom screw on the belt cover should be removed. The motor housing must be removed. You'll find 2 screws. Release those 2 screws. One's above the motor and one's directly below the motor. Once those screws have been loosened completely from the casting of the sewing machine, you can tilt the motor housing sideways and use a screwdriver to push the belt off of the pulley on the motor. Once that belt is pushed off of the pulley, the motor and the motor housing with the belt cover can easily be separated from the actual sewing machine head. In the motor housing, the top screw should be removed. We will use that screw in a future step. So as not to lose the screw that we removed from the belt cover, we'll reinstall that. You'll definitely want to save the motor assembly you just removed and these 2 belts, because you may want to convert your Ultrafeed sewing machine back into a portable machine someday. In the package for your new table and Workhorse Servo Motor, you'll find a brand new idler pulley or jack drive. If you have a fairly new Ultrafeed sewing machine, you'll already have the Delrin Performance Polymer jack drive installed on it. It's the one on the right. If you do not, you'll have a metal jack drive. It will need to be removed. You'll find an E-clip on the end of the shaft. Usually a screwdriver can be used to pry the E-clip off. Be careful, it may fly across the room. And now you can remove the metal jack drive and replace it with the Performance Delrin jack drive. It is a superior jack drive. And then reinstall the E-clip. Why do we need to remove the old jack drive or idler pulley and replace it with this new one? Well, the new one's better, but also the belt cover for the Industrial Tabletop with Workhorse Servo Motor will not work with the older metal jack drive. Here's a look ahead at installing that belt cover. Now find that screw that we removed from the motor housing, and you'll find a bracket. Use that screw and screw it completely down. It's a fairly long screw, so we're showing this in double time. That will secure the bracket for the belt cover in place. For optimal performance of the Ultrafeed Industrial Sewing Table and Workhorse Servo Motor, Sailrite recommends using the Power Plus balance wheel and not the Monster 2 balance wheel. In preparation for installing the belt, you'll find an adjustment screw here. This one's an Allen wrench head, but it may be a Phillips head as well. You can release that and the motor will pivot back and forth. Release this nut on the linkage and you'll find that the motor will pivot more freely back and forth. Now to install the belt. Place the cogged belt on the pulley on the motor. Then tilt the machine back and slip the drive belt over the balance wheel. The belt should be tight, but not too tight. When you press your finger against the middle of the belt, you should have about a 1/4 inch movement in the belt. When that is achieved, tighten down this set screw. Once proper belt adjustment is achieved, be sure to check your treadle. The top of the treadle should be all the way up at its neutral position. Then lock the bolt down at that appropriate position on the linkage. Okay, I know we just installed the belt, but we need to remove it, so tilt the machine back and remove it from the balance wheel. We'll now install the belt guard on the Workhorse Servo Motor. Remove this portion of the belt guard and install it as shown here. Install the 3 included screws into each one of these slot openings. Do not tighten them down completely until all 3 are installed. With the belt installed on the balance wheel, hold the belt taut with one finger. Then line up the belt guard so that it is in line with the belt. Then tighten the set screws. You should now be able to tilt the machine back and install the belt on the pulley of the motor. Then gently allow the machine to rest forward in its seated position. Now the guard cover can be slid on from the bottom all the way to the top. If you'd like to lock it in place, you can use this screw. We typically do not use that screw so we can gain access to the belt and pulley quickly and easily. Now the belt guard around the balance wheel can be installed as shown here in the video. If your Ultrafeed sewing machine came with the Flex 20 LED light, it can be plugged into the back of the Workhorse Servo Motor here. Due to the immense amount of power and speed the Workhorse provides, we recommend changing the top motor speed to 25. To set the top speed, press P, then hold down on S until 25 is reached on the monitor. Once it is reached, press P to lock that setting in place. Now your Workhorse is configured to work beautifully with the Ultrafeed sewing machine. Congratulations! The Ultrafeed industrial sewing table and Workhorse Servo Motor is now ready to be used with your Ultrafeed sewing machine. For the ultimate slow speed control, power, and a solid and sturdy sewing work surface, you can't beat the industrial sewing table and Workhorse Servo combined with the world's best portable walking foot sewing machine, the Sailrite Ultrafeed. These 2 package combinations make for a truly incredible performing sewing machine that can now be set up as an industrial sewing workstation. Ready to purchase? If you own an Ultrafeed sewing machine, all you need is the Ultrafeed industrial sewing table and Workhorse Servo Motor. Don't have an Ultrafeed sewing machine yet? Order one here. Click the link at the top right. I'm Eric Grant, and from everyone here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.